Today's gospel story takes place along the road to Jerusalem. Now, the closer Jesus gets to Jerusalem, the more attention he's getting. The disciples are watching the crowds get bigger and bigger. They're starting to realize how famous, how important, how great Jesus really is. So one night, during this intense and exciting journey to Jerusalem, James and John, two of Jesus' followers, pull him aside. It's as if they're saying this: Jesus, you are getting so famous. Everyone says you are the greatest, greater than Elijah, greater than the prophets who came before you. They are saying you are the Messiah. Jesus, you are the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And Jesus, we know we are not as great as you, but we want to be great too. Or at least, we want to be greater. Will you let us sit closer to you so we can? Now, Jesus knew that even though the crowds around him were getting bigger, that just made things more complicated for him, because he was coming closer to the end of his ministry, to the end of his life. He knew that in Jerusalem, he would be arrested, and he would be put to death. He did realize that what God had sent him to do was indeed very, very great. But it was not the greatness his disciples thought. They did not really understand where all this was going and how he, Jesus, would be remembered, not as a conquering hero, but as one who gave his life for us. So Jesus says to James and John, if you really knew what is going to happen to me, you might not ask that. He was warning them that the cross was ahead, that he was going to suffer. But whenever Jesus talked about his death, the disciples would get upset. So the other disciples got angry at James and John, and then Jesus just felt sorry for them. He knew they really didn't understand what it means to be great, and he wanted to teach them while he still had time. So what did Jesus want them to know about greatness? Well, now this is Cristiano Ronaldo, a Portuguese soccer player who plays for Manchester United. He has won 32 trophies in his career, including 7 league titles. He has scored more international goals than any other male soccer player in history. Most people agree that Ronaldo just might be the GOAT, the greatest soccer player of all time. Next picture. Now this is Marianne Allison, a runner from Guinea-Bissau, Africa. Last year, Dabo was competing in the track and field world championships, and in the final lap of a race, he could see that a runner close to him was in trouble. He watched him collapse and then fall onto the track. Even though it meant he would lose his chance of winning or even of getting his best time, Dabo felt he simply had to stop and help this runner, who was not even on his team. He said, just to finish this race together was the most important thing. Now, which one of those is more like Jesus? Being great in God's eyes does not mean being the best at something. It is not measured by numbers or amounts of dollars or medals or prizes. It is not about being compared with others at all. It is about serving others, like Dado did. I'm sure God would say, that Ronaldo, he is a joy to watch. But Marianne Dado, now he is someone close to my heart. Okay, next slide. Now, when COVID happened, many people were angry that businesses closed, that schools, restaurants, movie theaters, and even churches were closed. They were angry that they were not being able to go wherever they wanted. They were angry about being asked to wear a mask. They were angry at the government for telling them what to do and not do. And they felt their cause was righteous, that what they were doing was great. They believed they were standing up for their freedoms, so they went into the streets. Now this picture happens to be of a protest in England. But in the United States, too, there were similar protests, including outside hospitals, where protesters blocked traffic, confronted workers, and disrupted patients coming and going. They were hoping these protests would make the government change their policies. Next. So I think nurses like this one have very hard jobs. They also would rather not wear masks. They also would like to go to restaurants. They also wish things would go back to the way they were before COVID. But they have to take care of people who are sick. During this time, they had trouble even getting protective masks and clothing. They were working around sick people and worried about getting sick themselves. There were no vaccines then. Still, they stayed because they cared about people whose bodies were not as strong as theirs. They cared about children. They cared about the elderly. When I look at this nurse, I think she must have been a little frightened, and yet she stood for her patients. Which one of these is more like Jesus? Being great means serving something greater than ourselves. It means giving our strength to those who are not as strong as we are. It means defending those who need protection, who need our care. All of those who care for the sick and the vulnerable are especially great in Jesus' eyes. Next. This is a TikTok influencer. I don't know who she is, but she posts videos of herself wearing clothes or showing how she wears her hair or makeup. She wants to be one of the most popular people on TikTok. Many people like her compete for attention on whatever social media platform is hot at the moment. TikTok is particularly hot at the moment. Hoping to get the most likes or followers or shares on that platform. In addition to getting the attention, these influencers hope that makeup or fashion or other companies will pay them for wearing their products on TikTok. They hope to become very rich. Next. Now this is another influencer. This is Malala Yousafzai. Malala is from Pakistan, whose rulers do not believe girls should be educated like boys. But Malala wanted to learn, and she decided to speak up for herself and for other girls. With the help of her father, when she was 12, she began to write a blog telling her story. At first it was anonymous. She did not use her name. Even so, the blog was read all around the world, and it became very famous. Everyone wanted to know who this amazing girl was. So Malala finally decided to use her name in public so that her message could be spread to television and newspapers. And it turned out this was dangerous, because some in Pakistan to this day do not like what Malala is doing. They have tried to silence her, but she has persisted. Now, which one of these is more like Jesus? Okay, now. Jesus does not see being great as being popular or rich or getting the most attention. Not at all. Now, you could call Malala an influencer. She is even more famous than most TikTok influencers. But so being famous is not bad. But greatness comes from how we use our fame, our influence. Malala is now only 24 years old, and she is one of the most influential women in the world. And her cause has remained true, to inspire young women and girls to seek education. Each of us has some seed of greatness in us, for we are made in God's image. So it is human to aspire to be great, or great-ish. And because our talents and gifts come from God, we honor God when we develop them. As far as Jesus is concerned, if you have worked hard and developed your talents and become really, really good at something, and it gives you joy, that's terrific. That's as it should be. At the same time, the more we are given, the greater other people think we are, the more God calls us to find our greatness in sharing it with others. And the good news is, we don't have to compete with each other for God's love, for there is enough love for all of us. And God loves us already. There's nothing we can do to make God love us more. God sees greatness in us even when we do not. You know who is super great? Jesus. Jesus is great. Jesus really is the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And God gave us Jesus to show us the way to be great, to show us what greatness really means. Beloveds of Christ, when we follow the way of Jesus, we find our greatness. For then we reflect God's glory in the world, and we are a light to others. Now, isn't that great?